All right, everyone, I have Macall Gordon on, and I'm super excited to talk to her. Not only is she a gentle sleep coach, but she also is a lecturer in a department of psychology with mental health counseling, couple and family therapy. She's very passionate about helping parents through this stage of life and talking about sleep. And what I'm excited about for this podcast is that like every 6 months to a year, we have a sleep episode on because it's something that we all need to do to survive. And there's so many different approaches to it. And we've had somebody come on and talk about sleep training. We've had somebody come on and talk about gentle sleeping, but kind of what the missing puzzle piece here is that each kid is so different and not each method works for each person. And when you look at the statistics, people who tried like sleep training almost half failed at it, or they think that they've failed at it. And we're going to dive into why that is. Or even the gentle sleep, some kids need they're like, hey, get off me, I'm ready to go to bed now. So we're going to dive into this, and I'm super excited to have you on the podcast. So thank you so much for coming on.
Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. Yes, I love talking about this.
Yeah. So I'd love to start with, how did you get into becoming passionate about sleep
Yes.
and kind of the message that you're spreading?
Well, my reason for getting into this work turns 28 today. So, yeah, so I was a mom in the early 90s, and I knew from the outset that my daughter was not like I expected babies to be at all. And that feeling has not stopped till, I mean, not even to today. She's not like any other kid I know. Um, and I was really suffering at the time. There were two options. Cry it out or gut it out. Right. So it was either do cry it out or you just had to try to make it through. And I can tell you, I mean, I knew I couldn't do crying it out. And I knew she would cry for hours and hours and never give up ever, ever, ever. So I was like, I'm not even going to try it. But on the flip side of that, I was not a good mom on many days. It was not happy at all. I was so beyond overwhelmed and tired. I kind of just thought there needs to be a better way. And number one, there needs to be something else besides crying it out, A, and B, none of my experiences tracked to what I was reading. Now, at that time, the internet was like barely getting started. I literally remember a phone book of the internet. Like that's how small the internet was. So it was all books and magazines, and none of that stuff mapped to my experience. So I just, of course, you take it on yourself and you go, maybe I'm just not very good at this. I'm not getting it. So I had thought that that would change in 28 years. And honestly, I don't know how much of all of it has. There's some stuff has changed, but some of it very much the same. So I'm, here kind of to help those parents. I meet them every single day. I work on a telehealth platform. So I've talked to literally thousands of parents. So right up to people who've just barely had babies, and they're having the same experiences that I had. So it's a huge need, I think, to talk about all of this in a different way.
Yeah, I agree. And I think as a first time mom, we're not as tuned into our intuition at that point, and you're kind of like, why isn't my baby sleeping? Is there something wrong with them? Is there something wrong with me? I'm taking this sleep course, I'm reading all these things, and it says I need to be doing this thing, but like you said, it's not working. And then you feel like a bad mom. You're like, I'm doing something wrong, or there's something wrong with my baby. Like I remember with my husband being like, why isn't she sleeping? Why doesn't she sleep? Like, and me thinking like, I every single month being like, okay, what's her sleep schedule supposed to be? What are these like, and stressing myself out so much, trying to make these things stick when maybe it wasn't necessarily working for her. So,
Right.
I'd love to dive into that too, because it's more than just these different methods. Kids are
Yeah.
different.
Kids are different, but I can tell you you said we don't know to tune in, or we can't tune into our intuition, but really there's a cultural what is it? Force something that automatically works to undercut our intuition,
Mhm.
because all that information that you read is so fraught with fearful messages that I'm not kidding. I get parents of 1-month-old babies who will say things like, "Oh, okay, I know, I've got a bad habit. I'm like nursing her to sleep." Well, yeah, she's a month old.
Right.
Of course that's appropriate for you. Well, I'm worried that people tell me, and it's always people tell me. It's not what the parent instinctively wants to do. They say, people tell me, or I've read that I shouldn't start these bad habits. I mean, first of all, we could unpack all of that all by itself in this
Mhm.
conversation. Like, what are bad habits for a 1-month-old baby, right?
Mhm.
Um, that the cards are so stacked against parents listening to their intuition, which keeps us all on the hook for searching and looking and buying. And, we're really made to believe that we shouldn't trust our intuition. And so right out of the gate, we've got parents kind of behind the 8 ball. I literally just talked to a parent yesterday whose 4-month-old baby was sleeping really beautifully by all benchmarks, beautifully, exactly on track. It was manageable for her. She felt great. She was nevertheless, like, for sure thinking she had already screwed it up. And her baby was sleeping perfectly. So it really is sort of in the water that
Mhm.
we've that the culture of the parenting industry kind of keeps parents off their center.
Mhm.
So part of my work is to help validate, like, your inclination to feed your baby to sleep or hold them or rock them or whatever it is. You're actually doing the right thing for your baby rather than causing something negative to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like to argue with that, that the inclination to not be on center starts with pregnancy and birth. Like, you're taught not to tune in, and so many things are taken from you, and that birth is like a medical problem instead of or pregnancy, even it's a complication instead of
Right.
a natural thing that happens. And to me, I don't care if you choose to have a medicated or unmedicated birth, anything like that. It's more being seen and heard and validated in your experiences, and so many mamas are not. So
Totally.
it starts there, where they're like, no, you're wrong. Oh no, you can't do this. Oh no, you whatever. And then you have this baby in this world, and they're like, okay, go take care of it. Oh, you're doing it wrong. Oh, you're,
Mhm, mhm.
it continues. And
Continue.
we need to get
Yeah.
better at validating people from the beginning.
Yeah, because honestly, there are real consequences to that. I mean, I really think there are tangible consequences to parents coming from a perspective of, I probably don't know what I'm doing, right? Or I'm so afraid I'm going to make a mistake. I think there are probably measurable consequences of those kinds of feelings. If you never feel like, yeah, I've got this, that's a problem. If you feel like your instinctive impulses are bad, I think that's a problem.
Hmm.
Um, Also, the stakes are so high early on. So sleep is not just about sleep. Right now, it's about brain development, and it's about preventing obesity and preventing ADHD. And I like parents are it, they've told me, but I really agree that it's like a minefield, that they're a minefield of risk that they're trying to navigate just barely as they're learning how to be a parent. And I really think that we need to take that pot off the boil for parents and let them know that they have time to learn, they have time to experiment, they have time to learn who their baby is. So, from my perspective, we don't even start, intervening in any way in sleep till after 6 months, which shockingly is kind of a revolutionary idea right now,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just so much, again, that goes into sleep. It's something that we all need. That's when our bodies heal and restore. So of course moms need to sleep too. And I think that that's kind of where the catch with sleep training comes too. And I just remember feeling so, and like you said, the information comes from the outside. So being told that I was doing it wrong because Jovi nursed to sleep until I don't know what age. Even now, I mean, she'll be 2 in September and I nurse her before bed, but now I nurse her and then I say, "Okay, it's time to go to sleep." And she goes, "Okay." And she lays down just fine and goes to bed.
Oh,
But she didn't start sleeping through the night till she was like between 13 and 14 months old.
yeah,
And that was just like mind blowing to people. Uh, like basically the whole time being told like, "Well, what's wrong? How come she isn't sleeping? How come she's not
yeah.
sleeping?" And me feeling like I was doing it wrong, that I had
Mhm.
created these horrible habits. But also looking back at it, I mean, this is the other part that people don't take into consideration, which I'd love to get into because I know you talk about how between 20 and 30% of children are come into the world wired to be more sensitive.
Yeah.
And also just from Jovi's birth experience, it was a very complicated birth. She ended up in the NICU for a week. And when we brought her home, I mean, there was just so much that went into it. It was the middle of the pandemic. And I was extremely stressed. We were extremely stressed parents. Babies pick up on that too. And her sleep was very, very different. Now, my second, Tula, she's 3.5 months now, and
Mm,
her birth went perfectly. Everything was picture perfect.
mhm.
Um, we brought her home that night, the same day she was born, a few hours later, and she's a completely different sleeper than my
Yeah, yeah,
first. And I'm
yeah,
not doing anything differently except for I'm stressing way less. I know with Jovi, I
yeah,
was like, she should be napping now. She should whatever. And with Tula, I'm like, oh, she'll figure it out. Like, whatever,
yeah,
it's all gonna work out. But
yeah.
just even from the beginning, their lives were completely different. And so I'm now just thinking that that has to play into those first 6 months of sleep.
Yeah, and also a difficult birth is actually it's just anecdotally related to a sort of a more sensitive temperament. Why? Who even knows? I can't even figure that one out. But I did a big parent survey, and that was one question I asked, as I was like, I wonder if this is a thing, right? And it kind of was. So a lot of kids who were sort of more sensitive, intense, alert, were more likely, their mom was more likely to have reported a difficult labor and or birth. And certainly time in the NICU seems like kiddos are just more sensitive, those that have been in the NICU. Um, yeah, parents with two very different children know this to be true. Absolutely. Like one is the one way and the other is the other way. And I tell that to parents, especially because as a sleep coach, of course, I do sometimes hear from people with crazy good sleepers, not often though, right? And the people who don't have good sleepers always have that friend whose
Mm-hmm.
2 month old is sleeping through the night.
Right.
And that friend will say, "Oh, I did taking care of babies, and now my baby's sleeping through the night. You should do that too." Well, the thing is that that baby probably would have slept that well no matter what that mom did. That was a baby wired for sleep. I think if you talk to her and ask her questions, there are other things she would say, like, "Oh yeah, I can just lay her down and she falls asleep." If you don't have a kid like that, you are probably going, "I have never heard of such a thing," right? It really is a whole different world if you have a more sensitive sleeper,
Mm-hmm.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
It's a completely different path.
Mm-hmm.
One that is, I say, harder, steeper, rockier, has less of a a marked trail. It's really hard. So I'm happy to work with these folks, and also they are often quite relieved to find out that it possibly is something that their child brought into this world with them, and that's why sleep is so hard. Because you're
Mm-hmm.
right, you're thinking, it's me, what am I not doing that I should be doing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm just getting flashes of like with my daughter, my oldest, like my husband and I taking turns with her at night, being like, shh, shh, she's like bouncing her, trying
Oh,
to get her to sleep, like doing everything. And then with my second, like I go in, I nurse her, I lay her in the bassinet and she's out. Like she wakes up I mean, which it might change. We're coming on the 4-month regression, so we'll see
Yeah.
what happens.
Yeah.
But she wakes up once a night to nurse and goes right back to bed. And my other daughter, that was not the story
Never.
at
Yeah.
all. And never,
Yeah.
like even before the 4 months, like it just,
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
that's
one time she
yeah.
slept like 10 hours and we're like, oh my gosh, we have a good sleeper. And then
Yeah.
that was it.
No, I remember my daughter, and again, now you get this blur. That first year was like a blur, but I remember times where she was a baby, not a teeny baby, but like a 9-month old. And I was waiting for her cues, waiting for her cue, waiting. I mean, I would watch David Letterman come on and go off. That was 12 o'clock, 12:30 at night. And she was still like going strong. And I thought, this, and I had been trying to get her to sleep, and she just wouldn't go to sleep. And I didn't know what to do, because our reality was so far outside the box. It was
Mhm.
like, this doesn't resemble anything I imagined. And I at the time didn't have any friends with babies. We weren't living in a place with other babies. So I didn't have anything to compare it to at all. All I knew was like, this didn't feel normal at all.
Mhm.
My second one also was a sensitive sleeper. So I did not have your experience either of like apples and oranges. But it really does happen. And that benchmark of those first few months, even if the 4-month regression goes a little wonky, chances are your little one has a baseline of whatever it takes to fall asleep. And this is where temperament comes in. I kind of call it the sleep system. That's just this term I use. But the idea is, if you really think about what it takes to go to sleep, you have to know you're sleepy. Number one, you have to get the signal that you're tired. You have to be willing to turn away from the world and listen to that signal. And then you have to be able to have sort of the sensory context, the physiological set point to just go to sleep, right? To just succumb kind of to your fatigue. If anybody's had insomnia, we know what it feels like to not be able to go to sleep, even if you're tired.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like that for these more alert babies. They don't know they're tired. That signal is not that strong because they're like, go, 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 go. And then they're often really sensitive around sleep. So little tiny things bug them, right? The feeling of the mattress, or being lowered into the crib, or 8 million different things. So they just have difficulty on every level of sleep. And that's why it takes so much work. I mean, what you said, the bouncing, the loud, a yoga ball has become one of my indicators of one of these kids. Parents go,
Mhm.
yeah, we bounce her on a ball to go to sleep. I
Yeah.
mean, think about that. That's like what you're saying too, is like probably loud. You were loud. Yeah.
Oh
And
yeah, we
very,
were like shushing. Although we had the sound machine on, everything going, we'd like be shushing at the top of our lungs, like shh, shh, like just bouncing her and like swaying her. And then I'd have to like do this whole routine to get her into the bassinet and yeah, with my second, it's just like a completely different
yeah.
experience. So
Yeah. Well, and what you're talking about too is a different kind of sensory processing. So some of these little kids need, like, some little ones like lullabies and rocking, which is very gentle and it like pulls them into sleep. These more alert ones seem to need like this big loud input that like pushes them down into sleep. And but that's a good example of how you can feel like a little nuts,
mhm.
right? Here's this tiny baby and you're practically yelling and bouncing. Like, how is this helping you go to sleep? I don't understand. But it was probably the only thing that did. Yeah.
Mhm.
I had to run
Mhm.
a dust buster on the ground, like have it running. Like, when my daughter was a tiny baby, there wasn't even white noise. Like, that wasn't a thing. So we would
Mhm.
run this, dust buster loud
Yeah.
on the floor.
Right. Well, what kind of like cracks me up though about I was telling my husband the other night, because people still say creating bad habits when it comes to rocking or nursing or whatever. And I don't think that you can really have one. I'm sure there are certain bad habits out there. Obviously, if you're doing something unsafe or whatever to get your
Yeah.
kid to sleep, like that's not a good habit to have. But I was telling my husband, I'm like, what's crazy to me though, is that a lot of the sleep training stuff that's like, you can't create these bad habits, but yet the room has to be completely pitch black. Not even, they're like, if you even have a tiny light of anything, cover it. The sound machine has to be super loud. But now that's the, like how my daughter has to go to sleep, Jovi. Like now it's like, if she can't, she's not, she'll sleep, she can fall asleep in the car sometimes if like we're on a long drive, but she has to have her environment to go to
Yeah.
sleep. And I'm like, that, how are those not crutches too? Like, I agree, like some light sound machine is fine, but like hers is so loud. Like even when guests have stayed here, they're like, holy crap.
Wow.
Like that is, yeah.
Yeah.
Like they don't want to sleep in the
Wow.
room next to her because it's too loud.
Wow. I think there's a balance, between doing what works for that kid to help them sleep. Like I know I cannot sleep without white noise. Forget it. I can't. Is it a crutch? I don't know. I can't, maybe, but it's not how it allows me the ability to fall asleep. So, I mean, I truthfully hate the term sleep crutches.
Well, I was just gonna say, maybe none of
Oh,
them are, but I'm like, you can't
yeah,
say like nursing is helps
yeah.
them fall asleep, but the white sound machine, you know what I mean? They're all things,
Yeah, no, it's
tools.
a really good point. No, it's a really good point. And that speaks to the whole bad habit things. So I'm so happy to maybe put this out on the airwaves right now. The idea that you can have a bad habit in a child under 6 months is not supported by any research that exists. And it really doesn't make developmental sense, right? So literally everything else we have a baby do, we know they will develop that skill in time. We don't say to parents, ooh, don't carry that baby, because that baby will become dependent on being carried and they will never learn to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Like we know you can't make a 2-month-old baby walk, no matter how
Right.
hard you try. They can't walk. They need vision, they need balance, they need motor skills, they need all kinds of skills in order to walk. Until they can walk, we carry them. So
Mm-hmm.
it's why we really, sleep is a whole different animal. Like we consider, or the information looks at sleep in a completely different way than every other skill a baby or a child has to develop. Every other skill the parent does for them till they can do it themselves. We've gone a little bonkers with the advice on sleep and bad habits. The idea that if you rock your baby to sleep at 2 months, they'll never learn, that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about sort of giving them the support they need developmentally, number one, and also in terms of their own temperament and processing. So I would call white noise a support, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you didn't have those things, would she ever sleep? Probably not. So
Mm-hmm.
then it's balance, right? We're giving her the right context, but she's in charge of going to sleep, of the process of going to sleep. That's great, right? I can't sleep on an airplane. You could have me practice every day, and I cannot sleep on an airplane. It's just not, I can't do it. So we all have those weirdnesses, I think, around sleep. And
Mm-hmm.
about figuring out which of those for you are manageable, doable, sustainable, and which are not.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
Yeah.
yeah, but you really can't create bad habits that you can't easily shift when your baby is older. That whole idea that you better start early or else is, again, not supported by any research that exists.
Right.
I don't know where it comes from or why somebody made it up, but we can
Mm-hmm.
just literally ditch it because it's not a thing.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a lot of parents are coming to you when they have a kid they've tried a bunch of different things and maybe it's not working. So you've kind of coined this term, a live wire.
Yeah.
And so these parents are coming to you in hopes that you can offer some different information.
Right.
So what are the signs, I guess, to maybe see if you have a live wire? Obviously, we've talked about some of them already, just just and then like what are maybe a couple of sleep hacks or tips
Yeah.
that you're giving them without giving your whole thing
Yeah.
away?
No, it's great because honestly, these parents, I really worry about them. There's, probably 25% of parents have at least one, maybe more, have one of these kids. And for them, chances are they're way more tired than parents who have a mellower child. And they feel like they're the only ones. Every parent I've talked to does
Right.
not know that their experience is totally common. There's a whole world of parents who are hanging on by their fingernails. And a lot of it is because you're right. It's not like they haven't tried sleep training or they did it badly. A lot of these parents, in my survey research, I found that parents of more intense kind of alert kids had tried a higher number of strategies with
Mm-hmm.
less success. So
Right.
they had tried them all and they don't work. And here's why: because those strategies are written for mellower kids. So the stuff about like, look, crying it out's not that bad. It's like 3 nights of like, maybe it'll be 30 minutes of crying the first night and then 15 and then none. Okay, that is not even remotely the case for these kids who again will cry for hours for
Right.
weeks, right? So live wires, I like the term because it's other terms are like spirited, fussy baby, high needs, highly sensitive. It's kind of all under that same umbrella of kids that are not in the middle of the bell curve on sensitivity, alertness, intensity. Now, intensity, people always think that means like meltdowns, which it does, but it's also some of these kids just feel everything more strongly. Everything's a big deal. Happy, sad, everything's a big deal. They're really persistent. They're incredibly perceptive. Like they don't miss a thing. So a couple of my little signs, one I already mentioned, the bouncing on the ball. If a parent ever says it's like he has FOMO, you fear of missing out, because he just fights sleep so hard, like does not want to be put down to sleep. Never gives up. So persistence, perceptiveness doesn't miss a thing, notices
Mm-hmm.
everything. Um, they they often have terrible or late sleepy signals and they have really powerful second winds. So if you miss that tiny
Yeah.
little window, they maybe looked a little glassy, you looked away, they had that sign and you look back and it was gone and they're just like, forget it. Like there's no sleep happening. And often they really have a tough time with change. So transitions can be hard, surprises can be hard. It takes them a while to like come around to whatever it is you're going to do. There are more, but those are the really big ones. Where does it come from? It's hardwired. Really, these kids come into the world with this kind of processing system. I say live wire because not only do I feel like they have a little more current running through their little systems, but they have fewer coverings on their nerves. So they're just more open to the world, which is yay, amazing. These little guys are amazing. And they're a total handful because they're constantly being overwhelmed on some level by the world that they're so excited to be in. So it's a lovely mixed bag. And I don't know if any of this I'm positive it's ringing true for your older one.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Um, so in terms of sleep, first of all, the important thing to know is every piece of sleep writing out there is written about mellower kids. It's not written about your child. So don't expect it to be, they're not talking to you is what I like to tell people. Some important hacks. One is make sure you know how long they can stay awake for their age and stick to that like a big dog. Because again, if you miss that window, they're into their second wind and then you've got a really wired kid. These little guys power up. They don't get more tired, they power up.
Mm-hmm.
The next sleep is 10 times harder. And then the next sleep after that is even harder. And then bedtime is late. And then you have a really overtired kiddo. So sometimes just getting ahead of their second winds is everything. It's an easy thing to do too. It's so easy. So just watch the clock. Don't wait for them to look tired because they never ever will. That's one. The second one is that there are strategies that work, but there's no way to sneak up on a live wire. I think when parents, they're usually, by the time they get to me, they are running on fumes. They're so tired. I think there's a little bit of a hope that there's some magical cure, something they can do that their child will not even notice that will completely change their sleep. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So anything we change to their familiar behavior. So if a parent's been bouncing them all the way to sleep and then putting them in the crib asleep, the first time you put them in at all awake, they're going to freak out and they're going to say, but you get me to sleep on the ball. That's how it goes. And they're going to lose it a little bit. So we know that that's going to happen. So just know that whatever you change, they're going to hate it at first. And you have to move through that. So I always say, pick something you know you can do, be as supportive as you want to be to that. And then you have to push through whatever the blowback's going to be. Because they're going to hate it. I have parents of 3 and 4-year-olds who are still full on lying in bed with their child for more than an hour, like for a long time, to be able to get that 3 or 4-year-old to sleep. When parents are like, I can't do this anymore, then we have to change something. And when we change something, at first, the child will really not enjoy it because they won't understand why it's changing or what they're supposed to do. And we can be really supportive and say, I know you don't know how to do this. And we're still going to do it because mama's tired. Right? Mama's tired. So pushing through, and then allow, whatever method you decide to use, it really is okay to calm your kid down. Right. So a lot of the cry it out stuff says, don't, go in and soothe your child, but don't pick them up, whatever you do. I just think that's, I don't know why we tell parents that. Calm them down. Nobody's learning anything when they're truly hysterical. Calm them down, put them back and keep going. Right. The worst thing, and we all have done it, I did it a million times. The worst thing we can do with these kids is work and work and work and work, then doubt ourselves and go, this isn't working. I'm just going to feed him to sleep. Because then with these little sharp little guys, you've just set the bar at how long they will work the next time, because they know that a bottle or whatever it is out there somewhere. They just have to find it. So then you've just set the bar at how long they will push the next time. And we want to really not do that. So pick what you can do, really push through, and have confidence that it's a reasonable thing to ask of a live wire. And that's really important too, knowing what's reasonable for that age. Also, you get to decide what's a problem as a parent, right? So you said your child was waking up until 13 or 14 months. For some parents, they're like, I'm okay with it. That's fine. I can hang with that for a little longer. If you feel like it's okay, there's no problem. There's no need to change it. It's only when you are suffering, I think, that it's time to go, okay, let's ask our little one to change a little bit.
Right. Yeah. I relate with that again, just because I felt like I was doing it wrong. Everybody's like, you're doing it, like she should be sleeping through the night, blah, blah, blah. But I would just, up until that point, like literally I would just go in, nurse her, and she'd go right back to sleep. I wasn't like we were up all night ever or anything like that. She was super easy. It'd take 10 minutes and it wasn't that big of a deal. But then I was pregnant with my second, and it got to a point where I was like, babe, like I'm not going to be up with 2 kids all night. Like I can't do it. And he would go in when she'd wake up, and she was super pissed at first. But honestly, she never once cried for more than 10 minutes. and she would get really mad at him.
Yeah.
And I just had to stick to like my thing because I had a rougher pregnancy my second time, and I was just like, I'm exhausted. I get pregnancy insomnia like the first trimester. And so I already
Oh
like was barely sleeping, and I'd feel like I'd finally get to sleep. Then Jovi would get up, and I'm like, I
my
can't
God.
care for her. Like I'm exhausted. I feel like crap. Like,
Yeah.
and I really didn't, we had tried other things before, and I'm like, okay, 10 minutes is like the most I could do. But even during that time, my husband would go in and like check on
Yeah.
her. She would know that we were there,
Yeah.
and it never lasted more than 10. And
Yeah.
usually if it did, it's because she like pooped. So
Yeah. 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 So that's a
like,
reason. Yeah, I
right.
mean, sometimes parents really need reasons to like really draw a line. You know, I was also pregnant with my second, and had to say, okay, no more night nursing. I really can't do it. And we were, we started co-sleeping, and then she was in a bed next to our bed. And then by the time we moved, she's like, we said, do you want to be in our room? Do you want to be in your own room? And she's like, I want to be in my own room. And that was it. It was all over. Yeah, you have to decide what lines you have to draw and what's reasonable for your child. Um, and what you're willing to hang with. And there's no right or wrong answer there. The only time I caution moms is there's a tendency, I definitely did this, to say, my partner has to work and I'm at home. So I'm the one getting up all the time with the baby.
Mhm.
And it makes total sense. I get it, but you do need your brain too. Moms, it's not just about, do you have to drive and write reports? It's not that. You need your brain for your child. You also need that sleep for your mental and emotional well-being, and for your ability to still be an effective parent. An overtired parent is not an effective parent, and it sucks the joy right out of your parenting if you're really, really exhausted. So if you're working on sleep, even if one partner's home and the other is working full-time, both people can handle less sleep for a little while. So split that night up. It's temporary. It won't be forever. Because moms or whoever's at home, really dads, if it's dad is at home too, whoever's at home needs their brain just as much as that person getting up and going to work. So yeah, that's a message I'm sending back in time to myself, because that was a trap I got into for sure. So um,
Mhm.
really, really important.
Right.
The other little thing I was going to say is, we were talking about live wires, but really it is true that even across all the research on crying it out, it didn't work in every study for between 25 and 30% of the sample. Now, whether all of those kids were live wires, we don't know. I have a hypothesis, possibly. Um, but there are options, everybody. And the important thing is that it's not a bunch of different methods. Here's a big secret nobody wants parents to know. It's all the same idea. All sleep training is one idea. And if
Mhm.
parents know that idea, they can make their own method, honestly. The idea is you have to change your child's pattern of how they know to go to sleep. So if you have a 9-month-old, and let's pretend you're feeding her all the way to sleep and she's going in the crib asleep, she's like, this is how humans go to sleep. I mean, for all she knows, this is how you go to sleep as a parent. Like, she doesn't know. I've got a bottle, I'm in mom's arms, and then I wake up, and how in the world did I get here? I need a bottle and mom's arms to get back here. It's literally just a pattern. So all of sleep training is about changing that pattern so that she knows, or the baby knows, where they are as they're falling asleep, so that when they open their eyes, they know how to get back to sleep without engaging something else. You can do that process fast. You can do it slow, right? Really fast, cold turkey, cry it out. Ferber is next. There's the Sleep Lady Shuffle, which allows more kind of hands-on help, then all the way down to like Elizabeth Pantley's No Cry Sleep Solution. All of those are the same action, just some are fast and some are slow. So within that, parents can cobble together their own process, what they feel comfortable with their kid. That's the big secret I just told you.
Yeah. Well, and I love though that you talked about temperament though, because it's like you said, like you do feel alone. So when you do have, for some reason, when Jovi was a baby, everyone else I knew, baby slept great. And I was like, how? Then you think there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my kid. There's whatever. She just needed some extra support. And then, but like my older sister, she has 4 kids, and she said all of them slept very differently. And she had one that she co-slept with for like 6 months. She had a really tough postpartum, very tough recovery. And then one time after that, she was like, I'm going to put her in her crib tonight. The first time she put her in her crib, slept 12 hours. And ever since then, like just this, that she's like, she's always been my best sleeper. She's been like that since she was a baby. Even now she's 12 years old. She's her best sleeper out of all of her kids. She loves sleep.
Wow.
And she's like, that's just how she is. Whereas like her oldest kid wasn't a great sleeper as a kid, and he's 14 and he's still not a great sleeper. He'll be like, sometimes I just lay in bed and like, I just can't fall asleep. He'll lay there for an hour, and he's sensitive, wakes up to noises and has trouble falling back asleep. And that's how her husband is. So she's like, yeah, like, you know, she's like just very, very different.
That's the big interesting part, right? So I tell people, like, sometimes you learn about yourself. Of course, you often learn about yourself through your kids. But I remember one day going, why are my kids so intense? And then I was like, oh my God, I think I'm intense. Like, I really didn't know. I really never had a handle on that in myself. So in working and in learning about my children's temperament, it comes right back to me. And I've learned how auditorily sensitive I am, or how introverted I am. I always thought I'm like textbook extrovert. I'm not, you know, and I've learned that through better understanding my children. So it's common that people have the children that they themselves were. Right.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think not only do we have the children that we were, but like you said, you learn so much about yourself. Like your kids are little mirrors, and they reflect so much to you. Like even now, I mean, starting the toddler phase and realizing things about myself of, wow, like I'm not as patient as I thought I was. And I should probably work on
None
that.
of us are. Yeah.
You know, like I'm
None of
like,
us are.
she's not even 2. And I'm like, I think I've said this on here before, like she will scream and throw something, and it makes me want to scream and throw something. So am I a 2-year-old? Like at heart, like what's going on?
Yes.
And you learn so much about yourself through your kids.
Yeah. Well, yes. And you learn about your buttons and your triggers, and you learn where you are not healed, or where you didn't learn those regulation strategies, right? Like I was an intense, sensitive person who really did not ever get taught to have a handle on those things. So then when my kids are that way, then it triggers and I don't have a roadmap for how to be with them while they're freaking out, you know? So what happens when you have intense, sensitive parents who have intense, sensitive kiddos, right? Good and bad. It's both. But so maybe you learn regulation together, you know, you get to practice being the regulated one, because that's what that's all of parenting, right? Like we started out by talking about what happens in those early months, that stupid self-soothing stuff. Self-soothing is learned in relationship, right? We help, they call it co-regulation. The parent acts as a template for the kids. So, and that goes on, you're right, through the toddler meltdowns, through 3-year-old stuff, 4-year-old school. Like it never ends, folks. It's a long road.
Yeah.
Parenting is a long, long road. So buckle up. Yeah. Yeah. You know, the temperament stuff, what I would also say to parents, and you experienced it already, it really isn't you. Like you haven't created your kid's temperament. You haven't been too permissive. You haven't been whatever you think you've done to create this. It's not you. And if you turn it around and say, okay, what is my child? What are these difficulties telling me about my kid? And learning how to both guide and adapt to those things, because every one of those difficult traits has a silver lining. So even all that persistence and blowback, I always would flash forward to, my daughter being 16 or whatever and saying, I want her to be persistent. I want her to dig in her heels when she wants something or needs something. It's just when they're tiny, it's super difficult. But maybe knowing that there's good stuff in all the challenge helps parents not feel guilty, and also then kind of feel like there's a purpose to everything they're going through.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you worded that too, because there are so many things that happen when they're little that can be really frustrating. But again, they're traits that you want them to have when they're older. Like even when they start going through their independent phase and they want to do everything themselves, you're like, just let me do it because we
Yeah.
can get it done fast and we can move on. And it's like, I want my kids to be independent. I want them to know how to do things for themselves. I want them to be curious and be like, can I do this? You want your kids to develop that, but you're also like, okay, let's go.
Got to get out the door.
Yeah,
No, it's true.
exactly.
And it really is. It's hard to say, no, 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 I want them to learn how to speak their mind. But why is there so much talk back, or whatever it is? And it's like, no, 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 that's a package deal, right? It's a package deal. And so every kid that is like this with sleep, I always say, this one's going to be really smart, really sharp, divergent, creative. Like they're going to be incredible. It's just a really much steeper hill to climb right now. So take care of yourself, validate yourself, and look for those great moments, and just know that sleep will eventually happen. It will eventually happen.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time and energy and coming on today. Where can people find you, connect with you, learn more about you at?
Sure. So the main word, Instagram, Pinterest, website is Little Livewires. So my website is littlelivewires.com. Instagram, Facebook, you can find Little Livewires.
Awesome. Thank you again so much for coming on the
It was
podcast.
great. Thank you.